Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Naylor here from Reverend Guitars, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Vernon Reid.
Hello there.
As you know, Vernon is the guitar driving force behind Living Color, and as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that we may get into. But the reason Vernon is here today is to discuss the new signature series, the Totem series from Reverend.
Yep.
And it involves 3 different models. So let's start here. This is the Shaman,
Right.
Mystery Tramp,
Mystery Tramp.
and over here we have the Talisman.
Yep.
So check those graphics out, people. So this is about a 2-year project, I think, at this point.
Yeah, wow, right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
since I first started talking to you. There's a couple of things here that, technically that are pretty unusual for Reverend, and a few firsts. But before we dive into that, I think we should just get to the graphics.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there it
This
is.
is very much, how we collaborated, on the look of the guitar. There's been a lot of chatter about artificial intelligence and the uses and the misuses of it. I've been interested in all kinds of technology, and certainly, I'm a photographer, and I've used traditional photography with film, but also digital photography from the beginning of digital photography, as well as Photoshop and all the various apps and things that allow you to turn photographs into illustrations and things like that. I've embraced all of that. And when this thing started coming up, this idea of using prompts, particular statements to generate images, it was pretty interesting to me. And of course, there's been subsequent controversy about the way the different models have been trained and whether or not they've been used copyrighted material. And I want to say out front, I support all the efforts for artists to get their rights, in terms of confronting the large companies. Having said that, especially in communication with artists, there's a lively debate about AI as a tool versus advancing AI as a means to replace artists. So came at this from being an artist, a multimedia artist myself, and the idea of I was using DALL-E,
Yes.
Which is part of OpenAI, and I've been experimenting. A lot of this is also in the post-pandemic. We're in this interesting post-pandemic period. And I started generating images with prompts, and at a certain point, because don't use AI to necessarily, I don't use specific images. I don't base things on, make it look like this painting or that painting. Sure, I would say, you know what? Something like, give me a series of symbols. I would say, take MC Escher and mix it with Bill Traylor, and just to see what would happen.
Yeah, so you're using it more as an artist tool.
More as an exploration of different graphical ideas, and I came up with quite a few of these different images. And when we started talking about, with Ken, about a signature model, I was okay. Let me look at some of the things that I've generated, and see how I feel about them. And this is also about like a long history in terms of being interested in the avant-garde and like cubism and things like that. Non-representational art in a way.
Well, just to back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So the way this came about was when I started talking with Vern about ideas, he had sent me some images that were influenced, or what prompt would be the correct word.
Yeah.
Some of your favorite artists, even Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, the author.
Right.
Things like that. So he sent me these images, and then what we did is I took those images, and I actually used your prompts and generated a few more as well. Actually, a lot. I probably looked at over a couple hundred images in the end. But we took those images, and then I manipulated them so they would fit on a body.
Right.
Modified them a bit, moved them around, and then in some instances I had to add some other things into it
Exactly.
in Photoshop just to make it all cohesive. And then the end result, of course, is what you see. So it started with AI images, and then went to the artist.
Exactly.
Went to the other artist. So we had
Right.
it was like a three-way collaboration.
It was very much a back and forth, because what was so interesting to me was like I sent you these things raw, and then you would send me back the mock-ups, and I was blown away by the way you made them, because I just sent them, didn't know what it was going to be, and then the way you sent back the images, the way you had them fit on the bodies. There was a very interesting back and forth, because I would send you things, and then you would alter them and send them back to me, and then I would be like, wow, this is something I wasn't thinking about. I sent you a whole series of hoboglyphics. It was a graphical language developed by people who were riding the rails during the Depression. I think it might even go back further than that. And it evolved over time where people riding the rails would make these symbols, and the symbols started to become in a kind of common usage about whether or not food was available, whether or not there were guard dogs, whether or not, and they were very, very specific. And I sent you a pile of these symbols, and you put them together in the sequence that are on the neck.
That's what you're seeing on these inlays. Every one of these is one of the hobo symbols, and each one has a distinct meaning. So what we got here, starting up here, is this would be a symbol for jail, obviously a warning. And then we've got defend yourself. And then we have good road, police, hobos arrested, keep quiet. This one is bad water. And these three here are doubtful.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah. But again, hobo symbols used mostly during the Depression era, I think, and maybe the late 1800s or something.
They go back, they go back to the beginning of the rails.
Yeah.
And I think they probably became more and more codified. It became really codified during the Depression. By the time the Depression happened, I think they were pretty sophisticated language, because there's a symbol for, a lady will give you food if you let her preach. They're like super specific. But anyway, these are the ones that are on the neck of the instrument.
Yeah. So obviously that's a pretty cool slice of Americana going on here. And then you also sent me a bunch of these symbols here, which are West African
Adinkra symbols, right? And the Adinkra symbols actually they're actually kind of proverbs. They're actual sayings, but they're sayings that are encoded in a single image. And one of the things of the collision of the hobo signs and the Adinkra symbols is it's really speaking of journeys. It's really speaking of journeys, and it's really speaking of the collisions of cultures. In a way, this instrument represents a kind of alternate Americana.
Yeah, one of the things that you said to me on the phone when we talked a few months ago was it's Americana, Africana.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, really a meld of the two. So yeah, but then you have a sort of a complete story again, related to journeys, perilous journeys,
Perilous
perhaps.
journeys, and also strange meetings, like unintended meetings. I think our culture is about the good, the bad, and the ugly of people coming
Sure.
together, people being influenced in all different kinds of ways, and not to shy away from it, but I wanted an instrument that really, an idea that really brings together this idea of it's not that everybody agreed, but something beautiful came out of even the ugliest parts of the American journey.
Yeah. Well, you can't have the good without the bad and the ugly, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So all-encompassing, the symbolism combined with, the graphics. You've kind of got a story going on with these guitars, and we could sit here and attempt to explain in detail what each one's, but it may mean something different to each different person, right?
Yeah, it's meant to strike. It's about what you make of it, what you make of it, and where the instrument takes you, where you take it, taking you.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's the the aesthetic,
And it's also a collision between traditions and technology. The fact of using AI technologies, but including really traditional, much older symbology with a kind of controversial technology. It's about that as well.
Yeah. Well, another thing you said to me too was you're not a Luddite. Okay, so
No,
as an artist, you have to explore the tools that are available.
exactly.
And currently this is one of them, and again, it's controversial in some circles, but again, we use it as a tool as artists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm really have to say that in a collaborative sense, because I sent you these things, but you put them together. Like, I didn't dictate to you which Adinkra symbols to use. I didn't dictate to you which hobo signs to use.
Yeah.
I sent you the material, and then you put it together in a way that was really surprising for me.
Yeah.
So I feel really good about the process that we came to. It was very much a process of discovery and surprise, and I was very happy with the way. I have to say also that at no point did either you or Ken say we're not going to do that, or we can't do that, or at no point did you shy away from the implications, or you just went with it, and I have to say that's incredibly moving for me.
Well, appreciate it, and I do remember Ken saying something to the effect of, "Vern gets what Vern wants."
Okay.
That was the early directive. So, and why wouldn't we? We're fans and love what you do, and I knew from the beginning this was going to be a nice collaboration because you had a lot of great inspirations, great ideas that transferred well to a guitar, obviously. But should get to the nuts and bolts. So, this is actually the first time we put this particular body into production. It's a shape I've been sitting on for a little bit, and actually it's very similar to like the Corgan, but it's not a bolt-on, obviously. So we have a Carina body here, Carina neck, and ebony fretboard. This is the first production Reverend with the Floyd Rose tremolo. Ken's over there throwing goat horns at us. He approves. But that, and we got 3-rail hammer pickups here.
Right.
The typical, for us anyhow, volume, tone, bass contour, standard 5-way switch, locking tuners, pretty typical Reverend stuff. This has a nice satin finish on it, which is really cool because it makes the graphics look almost like a painting.
Yeah, we went back and forth about whether it should
Yeah.
be glossy, and we settled on satin. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it feels really nice with that satin finish against your arm and the back of the neck. And speaking of the neck, We have what I would call a soft V.
A soft V.
Yeah, and I had never really played much with guitars with the soft V, and it's also a first for Reverend again. But I was really happily surprised how fast it felt. Because when you think of the V, you know, you're thinking a lot of traditional guys like that, like the V.
Yeah.
And that was on a lot of older vintage guitars too.
Yeah, sure.
So it has a substantial grip to it, but it's really fast. And then the ebony fretboard's fast too, so you put them together, it's got a nice
It's got a nice feel to it. It's a very playable guitar. It's like it's an instrument that really compels you to play it.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time on dialing in the tone of these pickups.
Right.
We went back and forth several times. And we started with 3 humbuckers, and we were trying to work in some auto tapping and whatnot to get a very wide variety of tones. In Vern's situation, in Living Color and the other projects you do, you tend to go back and forth. You know, you want that heavy distortion tone, obviously.
Right.
But then you lean on a lot of like clean funk stuff too.
Yeah.
Because I know you were very influenced by like Nile Rodgers and you know, James Brown Band and things like that.
Yeah.
So the challenge was getting both those tones out of one guitar. And what we ended up doing was we got rid of the auto switching, and we just kept it simple. So we got a full humbucker here. This is actually the Hyper Vintage Railhammer humbucker, and then these 2 are the clean cut pickups from Railhammer. And these sound like a very clean, somewhere between a Strat and a P90. So, you know, you got your full-blown humbucker, but when you go into these in-between positions, you get the quack.
Yeah,
which I know you need, and you made it very clear you need the quack. But maybe you could, talk about the different tones and how you use them.
Right. Well, it's kind of funny. You nailed it. Like the idea of the in-between tones are really important because you get a subtle shift as opposed to just necessarily having the full-on kind of raging bridge pickup. And the idea of getting, that nice space between the neck and the middle and between the bridge and the middle. And that's where that kind of almost really shelved, the quack as you call it, that's like really great for rhythm sounds, but it's also very great for parts that are not full-on lead parts, but it's also great for lead parts as well.
Okay, and stick around. We're going to do another video where he actually runs through some of these tones that we're discussing right now. And I remember another issue that we dealt with was volume discrepancy or volume drop. A lot of guitars, you go from the humbucker to the in-between, or even to the other two. If you don't pick the right pickups, then you lose volume, or you get too much volume in the bridge, and then you got to go over to your amp, and that's not going to work live, right?
Right.
So this humbucker is actually our cleanest Railhammer.
Oh.
Yeah, and then these definitely have more output than a traditional Strat pickup. So you get that nice balance when you're going back and forth, and you don't have to mess with your amp. So that was kind of a hurdle at the beginning that I think we nailed down. So
Definitely, and also I like the idea of being, because I like to do like kind of pinch harmonics type things. And what's interesting is that I'm able to get some of those with the neck pickup as well as with the bridge pickup, with a certain kind of overdrive or distortion, and that's actually very cool.
And speaking of the harmonics overall with this guitar, it surprised me how easily harmonics pop off this guitar.
Absolutely.
And I think that has a lot to do with the pickups and the ebony fretboard, but this beautiful chunk of metal right here.
Yeah.
That's a lot of metal, and I think this enhances the higher frequencies where those harmonics live. So you hit one and they're just jumping out, and they sustain like crazy because these sustain like crazy too. So overall, I think this really complements what you like, and honestly, I don't think I've ever seen you without a guitar that doesn't have a Floyd on it. Is that true? Or
I've a couple, but you know, I do like the Floyd. You
Yeah.
know, for dive bombing and things like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, they do stay in tune, that's for sure. Yeah, so that's the nuts and bolts of this. And like I said, stick around. We're going to do a little sound demo in a minute.